thank you all for joining us again today. I want to give you an opportunity to tell our listeners about yourselves. So how about we start with Mr. Danny? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Listen, I'm Danny Bolden and grew up in Port St. Joe, Florida, and I am a community change agent. Okay. That is what I truly aspire to be. And the work that I've done in the community has been really focused around the fact that as a community change agent, you have to be prepared not only to identify what the issues are in your community that need change, but also be willing to speak truth to power, especially when there's change that needs to take place. And so the work is challenging because sometimes you have to rub against the grain. In other words, you, a lot of times power doesn't want to hear that there's something wrong. They want people just to go along. So in terms of the work that I and who I am, I'm the person that I will go out and seek out the opportunity to make the change and be willing to speak to power and to be able to stand forward on truth, to my truth that I believe. And I believe that the inequities that the community that of Northport St. Joe has experienced all of my life has been something that needed to be addressed. And so after coming back to my hometown, I said, look, I'm in a situation now financially and in my career where I can actually speak truth to power and try to invoke the change. So that's who I am. I stand on that. I'm prepared to do whatever I have to do to improve the conditions in my community. And we'll talk more about what those issues are. But that's who I am. And that's what I stand on as a human being. And I'm prepared to deal with the situation as it comes forward, but I'm not going to back down. I know that I need to do this work. This is a part of who I am.
So my name is Kwame Owusu Deku, and I really care about justice. I think it took me a while to realize that, but that's probably the driving force of everything I do, everything I aspire to. Even one of my favorite Bible verses talks about seeking justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with your God. And so, yeah, I think even learning the difference between equity and equality, like probably as a first year college student, and then even later recognizing that there are some situations where equality, is necessary, not just equity, and other situations where we can't be treating everyone the same, and we need to give redress to people who have been harmed historically and, are being harmed currently. And I think that is all mediated by the concept of justice, like doing what is right, and giving people what they deserve. And so that's what like really permeates everything I do, or my thinking, that, justice be served. And I think even before my present occupation, I always wanted to be a lawyer. And it's something I couldn't shake, for the longest time. And some way, somehow. And I wanted to be a criminal justice lawyer. And then, now I'm a professor. But I find that that desire for justice, always like has been present with me. Yeah. So that's like sort of my driving force.
Well, I'm Christian Wells. I'm a professor of anthropology at the University of South Florida in Tampa. And I guess when people ask, who are you? I can tell them you remember that song, gosh, Loretta Lynn, A Coal Miner's Daughter. I am the son of a coal miner's daughter. My mom grew up in the hollers in West Virginia, and my grandfather worked in the coal mines. And eventually, we got out of that situation. But just growing up in that context and hearing the stories from my mom, always keeps me grounded about who I am and who my family is and how I was raised. And we grew up with a lot of environmental injustices. And in fact, in that song by Loretta Lynn, there's a lyric toward the end of the song where she says, I remember well the well where I drew water. And it just is a very powerful line that says, wherever I am today, I'm humbled by my beginnings and where I am. And I always stay connected to that. So I feel, wherever I go, I try to remember the well where I drew water from. And I bring that with me into a lot of the work that I do. And just like Danny and Kwame, a lot of their work is about justice and about environmental justice. So that's the work that I've been doing with my colleagues for, quite a number of years.